So I know I look terrible. Sorry, I was at a fair all day and I'm not putting on the good camera because I don't want anything in HD. I've got like hairspray all over me and I'm totally sweaty. But I want to make a quick note really fast. I have a, I've had this idea for a long time, but I want to do visual philosophy, visual poetry, and then I also just thought about visualizing dreams. And one of the reasons that I really feel like this is important is because we are losing language. And I pulled out a book to show you really quick. This is Toilers of the Sea by Victor Hugo, and he's the guy who wrote Les Mis. That's it was turned into a musical about the French Revolution. But if you pick up any older book and you begin to read it, the language is just so much heavier, and you were able to express so many more forms of thought. People get frustrated with vocabulary and things like that because they think it's superfluous and just too much, and I'm never going to use that in my everyday life. But the sad thing is, if you don't have those words filed in the back of your mind, even if you're not using them every day, you literally do not have enough vocabulary to express certain strains of emotion. Imagine if a child never learned any other words besides, I like, I love, and I hate. And they only had those 3 words to describe something. So they didn't have any other types of emotional words. Like, well, I'm feeling, ambiguous about something. Or I dislike, but maybe you don't hate. So you literally would have fewer ways of expressing yourself. And because of that, you would adjust mentally and you would begin to think in those terms. So you wouldn't have other words to describe the feelings that you could potentially have. When I was studying French, and I mean, I'm not by no means an expert at French, but when I was learning French, I was disappointed in the language itself because there were not as many words to express myself as there are in English. So French poetry literature is more limited than English poetry and literature. There's more words to describe more emotions, more thought processes are able to happen because you have the words to express it. That doesn't mean that you can't feel it, but it means you can't say it. And how frustrating is that, right? So children, when they're very young, they have no words, and so they can only express themselves through sound, by crying or shouting or laughing, and they only have body language. And then as they develop, they learn words and things from their parents and the people around them. But if you have a limited vocabulary, you end up having a limited thought process. So you can only process as many vocabulary thoughts as you have the vocabulary for. And I'm hoping I'm explaining that correctly. Gosh, where did I get off on that? Everything's a rabbit trail. It's terrible. What was I saying? Oh yeah, but anyway, so there was just more language. And but the sad thing is, because we have lost some of our language, you have to kind of use other mediums to be able to communicate with people. And I'm hoping that when you communicate in the other way, in the inverse way, then you're able to bring back some of the vocabulary. So with things like visual philosophy, visual poetry, people, I feel like, have very shallow feelings these days. They have, if you watch the typical movie these days, it's so different than it was, like, even just back in the 70s, where in the 70s people were, on television shows and in movies, there was so much more human-to-human interaction. There was actual talking. There were slow points in movies and TV shows, and people would just be exchanging thoughts and ideas. There would be regular human movement, picking up cups, cleaning things up. Nowadays in movies, if the home is shown, it's usually shown very quickly, so you don't linger over the mom, doing something in the kitchen, or you don't see, a long shot of dad mowing the lawn or anything. The human movement has been limited to a frame. Okay, so people only have a frame to look at. There's no really understanding of body language anymore, especially when you have a face shut like this. I can't see the rest of your body. You can't see what else I'm doing. And because of that, there's no understanding of, well, what else is this person feeling besides with just their words? What does it look like when a human is feeling, upset and they're talking to somebody about it? What does that look like? And they don't have that anymore. And then you also have a lot of action, a lot of violence, and things like that. And when you're seeing that as your main source of human interaction, it changes your mindset and it limits you because you really only have the violence to fall back on. I'm not saying that you would behave in a violent manner, but it limits your ability to have regular conversations, because conversation is something that's learned by modeling. It's not something that's innate to human beings. So if you don't have that, then you end up, we have all these people who have anxiety about being, in public and talking. I think a lot of it's because conversation is not being modeled for people. They don't know how to talk to each other anymore. They don't know how to read body language. They have no intuition whatsoever. So what does it have to do with visual philosophy and visual poetry? Well, anyway, when you are able to communicate to someone pure emotion. So let's say I make a movie about a finer emotion. So, and when people say fine arts, this is very important. They don't teach us like sorry, but fine arts. Imagine if you're touching something like stone, okay, and it's really rough. That could, like, if we were talking about art, let's just say that like rock is kind of art, okay, and you're feeling it, and it's coarse and it's heavy, and you can do a lot of things with it, right? And it feels very coarse to your hands. So that could be like just I would say kind of the mechanics of art. And then when you have fine arts are those little tiny feelings that maybe you don't feel in everyday life. Art with like let's say it's being represented by granite. Those are kind of the big feelings, like anger and love and hatred and the big emotions, kind of the big main emotions. Fine arts are those little tiny feelings that are captured that we don't always feel. We probably feel them at some point in our lives, and someone has been able to capture them in some way, whether it's in a film, whether it's in a book, whether it's in a movie. And everybody's felt this, like, oh, I love this particular book or movie or song or whatever because it captures a certain feeling that I have or that I like to feel, but I can't find it anywhere else. And that's the fine arts. Fine arts touches on something that's kind of difficult to get to. So, if you think about, if we were thinking about, scrap the granite, but if we were thinking about like a tree trunk, that's kind of the arts. And then fine arts kind of branches out into those little tiny little leaves. So it's those delicate emotions that are really hard to pin down. That's where you get the fine arts from. That's what I think of it as anyway. That's not like a definition from a college or anything. But fine arts are difficult. They take a lot of skill. It takes a lot of effort. And I think that you can have, I think like arts in general have been poorly communicated to the layman. And art is for the layman. It's not for the people that are at the top. It really is. Art is supposed to be something that captures emotion and allows people to feel it in a repeated fashion so that we don't forget what that emotion feels like. It's not something, that's supposed to be elitist or, well, only the people in the finest colleges or whatever should be allowed to have arts. No. Art is for everybody. And the reason why we have art is so that we capture certain emotions, be they good or bad, so that way we can continue to have those or continue to remember as human beings so that we can better society down the road. Like if there's like with the Holocaust, we remember that because of the photographs, because of the movies, because of the feelings that are emoted from those things that we have that were art captured around that time. Okay, so we remember that because of the emotion, not because of the event so much. Like if you have a historical event but you don't have anything to tie it to emotionally, you will forget it. or it won't be as important to you down the road. But because we all have strong emotions about the Holocaust, it's less likely to be repeated. Not that it won't be repeated, but it's less likely to be repeated. Or, inversely, let's say, everybody, a lot of people are struggling with depression. Okay, so if you don't have things that capture joy, people, let's say down the road, many more people are struggling with depression. If we didn't have something to capture the feeling of joy, technically, the remembrance of joy could be forgotten, which is kind of frightening. But if enough people are depressed in a certain particular area or whatever, and I mean that has happened in countries when things are really, really bad. If you don't have a remembrance of joy, there's nothing to fight for anymore. And that's when people fall into, trying to do the escapism with drugs and alcohol and whatever. They try to get away and they don't remember, okay, this is what it feels like to feel good. So, a long rant and ramble, but the main point that I wanted to bring up was that poetry and visualizing it, or visualizing philosophy, or even visualizing dreams, because we don't have the language as much anymore to communicate our ideas. If you can visually demonstrate that to somebody and they can get that feeling, then they can begin to talk about it and begin to get their own vocabulary about those feelings. And because most people are not engaging with art in a way that's going to make them feel deeply about something, they will never, like some people I don't feel like have ever felt those feelings, which is scary to me, because that's what I grew up with. I grew up with, art that always spoke to me. I grew up with stories that really spoke to me. I grew up with movies that just, moved me to tears. But if you've never been moved in that way, and not everybody is as sensitive to art. I mean, I understand that. I'm an artistic person who's very sensitive to art. But if you do not have things in life that have moved you to tears or moved you to joy or something like that, you become kind of dead inside. And so, as a human being, you need to have a range of emotions and a range of expressions. Otherwise, you are so limited, and so you almost become more. Well, I guess just it's a very stunted mode of humanity. So anyway, that's my thought and my goal is I want people to experience more emotions, to experience, more fully what it means to be human. And if people can get the feeling directly from a visual concept, and then they can start talking about, okay, well, what does that make you feel? And if you don't have words for that, let's go find the words for that. Let's go find what that is. And I think that's a whole new journey that people need to start taking, is kind of rediscovering their humanity instead of just doing these same repetitious things over and over, of watching, the same types of movies with the same exact types of feelings, where they either watch like the cheesy romances or the violent movies, or whatever it is. It's just people are so limited, and it drives me nuts, because there's so much more to experience than the same 3 or 4 emotions that you've been having. It's the same with like pop music. It's like there's so many things to talk about in all of life, and what does everybody talk about? Either how they want to go find somebody, or how they want to be getting rid of them. It's just terrible. So anyway, so that's my thought for tonight, and tomorrow I'll try to do a better video on it. I gotta clean my room and freshen up for tomorrow. Try to get some sleep, because like last night I didn't get very much sleep. The night before I got 2 hours of sleep. Yeah. Okay. I will see you guys all later. Bye-bye.